Right, another totally rewarding chats. I've got Paul, who's with me every week, whether you guys like it or not. And we are lucky enough this today to have Nicole Long from, well, I'll let you tell you where she's from. She's been on the panel with me. I had to wear the lemon shirt. I had to bring it back. We've been on this making lemoncello out of merit lemons several times. So I had to bust out the same shirt because really, where the hell else am I going to wear this shirt? Um, how are you, Nicole?
I'm doing great. How are you, Sean and Paul?
Doing great. Doing great. Like I said, the weather's beautiful today, so it puts a smile on our face.
And I like that. I know you're going to tell us you work for the state of Georgia, but I like that you called us from a room that makes sure you know that the state of Georgia isn't spending too much on the walls and decor.
We are not wasting money on decor. Actually, the CFO sits in this space as well, so I can assure you we are not wasting money on decor.
Are they in there with you now?
They're up the hall.
Up the hall.
Yeah.
Um, So I know you well, but most people don't because I've been lucky enough to have you on a panel several times. As I mentioned, last time was making limoncello out of merit lemons. We did Wow 4%, which actually probably is Wow if you get 4% now. Um, but can you walk everyone else through your background, give us your kind of bio yourself so that neither I nor Paul screwed up?
Sure, I can do that. So, I'm Nicole Long. I have been in HR quite a few decades. And I've kind of had a zigzaggy career where I've worked in both HR generalist type roles and total rewards roles. I think I'm kind of unique in that I actually started out my very first job out of college, I was doing compensation. So I actually knew in college I wanted to work in HR, which is also kind of unusual. A lot of people just fall into it. But I started out with a psychology degree and I was like, well, if I don't get a PhD, what am I going to do with this psychology degree? And then I was like, oh, I'll get a business major too. I'll double major. And then it just kind of fell into place that HR would be a great way to use both. And when I started looking for my first job out of college, I was kind of struggling finding something in HR. And the state of Georgia hires a lot of entry level HR people. So I interviewed there and landed in classification and compensation. I've tried to get away from it a few times. I've been in a few more generalist HR roles, but I keep coming back to it. Um, I would say right now I'm serving as the Director of Human Resources for the Georgia Department of Audits and Accounts, but one of the reasons I took this role is there's a heavy compensation component with it as well. So I think, I've worked in a lot of different industries, healthcare, high tech, manufacturing, and again, sometimes generalist, sometimes total rewards. So I think it all kind of fits together and gives me a, good perspective. So, there's always something different going on in the HR and total rewards world, especially the past 5 years. So that's what's kept me interested and engaged. Also serve as president of Atlanta Area Comp Association, and that has just been a huge thrill for me. I've been involved with them since the early '90s, and it's been amazing to see the way we've grown. So that's been a great experience.
Yeah, shout out to the local comp associations, Atlanta area being one that has been successful for a long time. So,
Yes.
congratulations to you and the team for all that you've done there.
Yeah, we
Having
had
been to a few events myself, I really think they're fantastic. You do a
yeah
great
we,
job.
we had some good leadership through COVID that got us through that, and we've just grown and taken off since then.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm excited. Nicole said I don't have to call her El Presidente the entire session. That's what I thought was going to happen.
My term is almost done. Almost.
So we usually start with a speed round of questions to get you warmed up. So you let me know if you're good and ready.
Let's go.
All right. Are
Deep
you
breath there. That was a
I
deep breath.
know.
um,
I'm
are
scared.
you a coffee or tea person?
Both. Coffee in the morning, then I switch to tea.
Oh, is there a certain time of day that you switch? Is it like noon or is there a
I'm
certain?
really flexible about that, but 1 or 2 cups of coffee first thing, and then usually afternoon I switch to green tea.
Okay. Um, Compa ratio or range penetration?
I like them both, but I'm not going to answer both. I tend to use comp ratio more.
Okay, true comp nerd right out of school.
Mhm.
Um, and now we'll see. You'll be the tiebreaker vote on this next one, and it'll probably be every episode. If we give you a weekend away, would you rather go rough it camping or would you get a posh weekend away?
That one, I don't even have to hesitate. Camping is not in the equation. Posh weekend away. I don't want to have to work when I'm relaxing, taking time
Totally,
off.
totally. Marriott's were created for weekends away,
That's
right? Like
right.
there's no reason to rough it. I'm
And
with
in
you.
case you're wondering, it will be on a beach as well.
Okay.
Well played.
You don't need to help Paul on this case. Paul's going to start keeping score is going to be what's happening.
That's
How
right.
many comp cycles a year is the ideal number of comp cycles or merit cycles?
I'm just going to have to be a traditionalist here and say one.
Okay.
Mm.
Is that and is that for practicality or just I don't want to do that much? It's too hard to do more than once a year.
Yeah, I got to leave time for that trip to the Marriott on the beach.
That's perfect. Um, and the last one, are you a crunchy or creamy peanut butter person?
I am definitely creamy peanut butter all the way.
Okay.
There's a jar in my office for emergencies. I always keep one handy.
Behind glass, like
Yeah,
break if
that's right.
hungry.
Yeah.
Do you have a? Are you like you make it sound like you're into it? Are you? Do you have a brand preference?
No, I'm good with generic. Walmart brand is good.
There you go.
Okay. Um, so now we're going to make you do some more work as we go through here. I think one of the interesting things is your background and been around so long, both from the jobs you've held, but also all you get to see with AACA. Um, what are 2 to 3 key items you see successful programs do, comp programs, really address? Like of all the things they have to do, what are a couple of items that are really critical to having a great program?
Okay, so I'll kind of approach it from two different ways. I think one thing that's key to a successful comp program is the communication. You can have the most perfectly laid out, comp philosophy and comp strategies, and everybody can be paid fairly. But if you're not communicating well, nobody knows that, and all that matters is their perception. So I think communication is really important. In terms of kind of philosophy and approach, I think it's really important to build in some flexibility and also to really have a broad perspective. And that I think about that in a lot of different ways, but kind of the bottom line is market data is one piece of data and it's a tool you can use, but that's not the only thing you should be relying on. I really see more successful programs where the people involved have a good understanding of what's going on in the economy, what's going on in the environment socially. Also, pay attention to what's going on in different industries. A lot of comp people might kind of get blinders on and only consider what's going on in their industry, but actually some of their competitors could be outside of their industry, or could be some trends developing outside of their industry that will eventually affect them. So I think those are two things that are really important to have successful comp programs.
Now you mentioned something in there about building in flexibility. You work in the public sector. Let's just say the public sector is not always known for its flexibility. So I guess talk a little bit more about what does that practically mean, right? Given that you have to operate within some constraints, right, in certain industries, certain circumstances. I guess talk a little bit about the types of flexibility that you value.
Um, so I would agree that there tends to be less flexibility in most government organizations, but I've also worked for private sector organizations that were just as inflexible.
Sure.
I think if you don't build in that flexibility, you risk being left behind. And you risk, the pace of change is just so dramatic right now. If you don't have that flexibility and agility, then you're going to really be challenged when it comes to recruiting and retaining and building your staff that align strategically with your business. And I think there's ways that you can be flexible, even if you have some guardrails that you have to stay in between. There was one time I previously served as the director of comp and benefits for the state at the enterprise level. And traditionally we had one, singular pay structure other than like for the physicians and teachers and that type of thing. And we were kind of struggling with law enforcement, as a lot of public sector entities are. And this was actually a few years ago. But we actually broke them out and put them in a different pay structure so we could manage their pay differently. So sometimes even if you have a structure, you still need to be able to think outside the box. And maybe you have a limited budget, but there's different ways you can use that budget and have some flexibility around.
Got it. So yeah, that's helpful. I think willingness to change is sort of one, you've got something, it works, but the world's going to leave you in the dust if you're not ready to absorb, whether it's talent shock changes, supply demand factors, a pandemic, different things that crop up here and there where you might just have to change that great idea that you had and go in a different direction. So that's super helpful. I was just curious what you meant by flexibility in that regard.
I think it's really interesting you mentioned, other industries and getting outside their lanes. The question I usually ask people is where are you getting people from and where are you losing people to, as a good example? Because, if you only benchmark yourself against, the state or other jobs like that for some functions are transportable. How are you able to communicate that to management? That we have to benchmark or get outside of our, we can't just benchmark against our ourselves, basically.
Right. It can be a challenge depending on who you're communicating with, but I think what you have to do is have the data to support that. So maybe, if you're looking at entry level government jobs, look at what, people in a warehouse are making, or retail, or, other entry level jobs. And, if we're starting to get behind those in our entry level, either technical or kind of white collar, very entry level jobs, then that's something you need to be concerned about. So I think that's part of taking that broader perspective and being really aware about where the market's going overall.
I'll spin this a little bit. That's the positive side, the two things that everyone does well. When you've seen things kind of be not as well, have there been a couple of things you just see people traditionally do? And of course, the easy answer would be don't think outside the box or don't do the two things you just said. But, are there any other items that you see people either didn't focus on, which would be fair, or they focused on wrongly?
To me, one of the first things that comes to mind is, especially if you're looking at making some changes to your program or your structure, whether it's the pay or the job architecture or whatever it might be, is to make sure that you've got the right stakeholders involved. I worked on a very large project where we were implementing a new job and pay structure, and I kind of came in at the tail end of it, and it was, set to go live like within a couple of months of when I took on the role. And there started to be some hesitation in going live and getting things implemented, and I discovered that my predecessors who had designed the program had not involved appropriate stakeholders, meaning they had not involved the CFOs of different organizations. So they had been very involved with communicating with HR leaders, and they had presented some budgetary impact analysis to CFOs, but they never really went out and had the conversations with them. So all they had in front of them were these numbers, and they didn't understand what that meant and what the risks were if we didn't move forward. So it took some time going out in the field to meet with these stakeholders and do a little bit more explanation of what was going on and why and what the long-term positive impact could be, and we were able to implement those changes. But I think it's really important to just think beyond your little HR circle and make sure that you're involving additional stakeholders.
I've struggled at times in my own operating career where do I go to all those other stakeholders or do I work through HR partners, right? I was always in a specialist role. I've never been in sort of that HR leader role like you have, where you're kind of shepherding all those resources. But I guess talk about the coalition you need to create, right? So whether, if you're in the comp seat, you're in the HR partner seat, is everybody approaching the CFO? Is that a team sport? I guess, are there any rules of the road you've had around how to operate in that ecosystem, given that it's not just a comp person on an island in most
Right.
circumstances?
Right. I think it depends on the size of the organization and how they're organized and the culture. When I've changed jobs and been in a new, whether it's an HR director or a comp leader role, one of the first things I do is kind of, feel out the other leaders in terms of who's doing what and where the decisions are actually being made, and try to lay that groundwork and go out and meet with those other leaders and say, what are your pain points, and, how could we potentially help you, progress and get where you need to be. So kind of forming those informal relationships. So maybe you're not going for those decisions right away, but you're just building those relationships so that you're laying the path for those future decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing I talk a lot about with my own team is engagement of stakeholders is on a spectrum of maybe you asked them about the problem and you told them the answer. That's sort of one end of the spectrum. The other end is they're involved at every step of the way, right? They are grinding sausage with you. And then, of course, there's multiple stops in between. Do you have a rule of thumb around how often, or, certain milestones? And I know it's always a little bit of it depends on the circumstance, but I guess how do you approach, like, what should a stakeholder engagement strategy be for a given change or a given, implementation?
So we've gotten pretty far into the conversation before I've said the words "it depends." Maybe it snuck in a little bit earlier, but
I'd have taken with Paul. That might be Paul's longest at 17.
Yeah, I try not to use it too. I'm with you, but like, this is one where I understand it does sort of, it
right,
varies based on the circumstance. Let's put it that way.
right. Yeah, I like that approach better. So I think one of the challenges, in answering what you just asked, is especially now when we've got more remote and hybrid environments, that when you're in the office a little bit more, that can happen a little bit more organically. We have a very, very flexible hybrid environment. I mean, sometimes I'm not in the office at all during 1 week, sometimes 2 or 3 days, but it never fails. When I am in the office, somebody will wander in and we'll just have one of those conversations. So I don't know that I've ever really been in a situation where I've had a certain timeline. And while I already said that communication is very important and you want to keep it current, you also don't want to over communicate when you have nothing new to communicate. Then it's kind of like the boy who cried wolf. It's like, oh, here comes another email, from Nicole, and she has nothing new to say. So it just depends on the project that you're in and what kind of relationships you've built and what the culture is like in terms of, how everybody likes to communicate, and whether you're seeing people in the office or if it's all virtual or whatever it is, you have to adapt to that.
I think the real key part in that, is giving them time too, because I think, like we talk about a lot with some other communication around comp, is a lot of times all the stakeholders aren't from compensation. And so to be able to explain to them something in normal English and then let them go percolate on it and kind of think it through in their own terms and ask questions versus, throwing something at them in a 2-week period. And, I know comp people know this, but it's complex, right? It gets complex fast. Getting one paycheck is simple. Getting everybody the right paycheck and the right amount is complex. And so I think it is, like you talk about, I'm meeting with people as you go and giving them time. And I think that opens the dialogue to, I have a question. It's okay to ask you a question. We have a relationship. I think that's really important. So they feel confident when they help you roll something out, and they make a decision, so they can ask you why, what, versus shaking their head and then just saying no. So I think that's really, really important part that I think gets missed, because it's such a serial process in comp, right? I did this, now I got to go do this, and I got to go tackle this next thing.
Right. And even you start to get to the point where these stakeholders will come to you first and say, okay, I'm thinking about reorganizing or creating this new job, or we want to go in this direction. What are your thoughts? So getting involved earlier and, before they get to the point, I've got to hire someone with XYZ skills and I want to pay them this amount, and we haven't done the analysis to support that. So the earlier you can get involved in those organizational changes, the better.
If you want to add anything there, Paul, because I'm going to shift gears a little bit otherwise.
No, we can shift. I mean, I've been staring at this lemon shirt of yours the whole time, so I know we need to get to some discussion about lemoncello. Pretty,
Yeah, because otherwise I'll have worn this shirt for no good reason.
that's right. We know it's coming. The lemon shirt is on. We're going to talk
Yeah.
about Merit Lemonade.
Yeah.
So
I admire to get your money's worth out of that shirt, Sean. Your cost per wear.
yeah, that's why I'm after it. I had to get this. And then, of course, I was hoping Nicole was going to wear something to match, and she went with the apples or something. Left me hanging.
Sorry, not
Have
sorry.
limited lemon wardrobe, thankfully.
There are probably very few people who have. I mean, we can take a minute. I don't know if she'll hear this or in our stratosphere, but when we were at World at Work, as we shift to do the limoncellos out of Merit lemons, we were all dressed, everyone on the panel, in all this lemon stuff. But do you remember there was another woman who was at the conference who out lemoned us for that
She
day?
did.
And that's just what she wore that day.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, it is awesome. Like, it was a great outfit, but I'm like, none of us, that like beat all of us, and we were on the lemon palette.
We tried to recruit her, but we were unsuccessful.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
does she wear a different?
We were speaking for her. She wasn't going to jump up there.
I mean, there's only two theories. One is she has 7 fruits and she rotates among them, right? Or she was so certain that she was going to get value out of that session that she like, you're going to Comic-Con, you're going to dress up like a comic character. Like, she was going to the limoncello presentation, and I'm going to dress up like a lemon. Like, it's one or
She
the
was
other.
in that lemon state of mind.
That's right.
Or maybe limoncello state of mind.
I like your optimism, Paul.
Part of me hopes it's 7 different fruits, and like today is a cherry day, and she's gonna listen to this and be like, "They caught me. They know who I'm talking about."
I did ask her if I could highlight her, and she was like, she took a hard pass on that. She wanted nothing to do with being highlighted for her wardrobe. We've done the panel a couple of times as we've gone through, and I think I'm curious from your perspective, Nicole, like what has stood out from you from the questions? And I know there's one, if you don't get to, I'm going to get to. As people talk about the merit process, from the questions we've got in the comments, has there been anything that stood out from you from the kind of multiple sessions?
I would say, thinking about the sessions overall, just the variety in terms of what different organizations are doing and how they do it. I think the last one we were in, there were some people that had 0 merit, which that's my organization this year. There might have been some others that didn't admit to it. And then there was some, I want to say she had maybe a 5% budget. It was at least 4%, but it was quite a bit higher than what we're hearing, and also what people in the room were saying that they had to deal with. So just, it's the same wide economy, but the economy with that business or that industry can be very different in terms of driving what that percentage merit is going to be.
Yeah, I think the other thing out there for me was just the different approaches, right? I mean, we always take the peanut butter poll for a reason, from peanut butter to some people just want to get it done. They don't have resources. They're using Excel. They're just, to your point, the variety, especially, at Atlanta-Sherm, when we were down there, you really have variety because HR generalists as a whole have just all this other stuff to do too. And so they're trying to get it done. But even among World at Work, the questions, just the way people process, it's at 30,000 feet, it's an increase. Okay. And by the time you get to ground level, it's all over the place. And so that to me, I agree with you, is so striking when you get out there among them, among people and start polling them on how they address this. it's all over the place. And I don't know, Paul, if you see that too, because you have unique. We kind of have like we have a technology vendor practitioner, consultant thing going on here. Are you seeing the same thing? It's like when it gets to it, it has to be nuanced. And I hate to say it because I'll never live it down, but it truly is an it depends thing.
Yeah,
I've been surprised too at some organizations that are using that peanut butter approach when you consider like across the board increase or a COLA that you usually associate with government or union environments. I'm hearing some, I mean, I wouldn't say a lot, but quite a few organizations that if they have a limited budget, they'll just take that 2% and, spread it across. I mean, Starbucks just announced that's what they're doing as part of their cost cutting measures. So it's always kind of takes me back a little bit. It's not what I'm expecting, but you just do see a wide variety out there. And that maybe they just do that for this year and then they do, go back to a more pay for performance type model. So I think you just have to look at the business needs year to year and the best way to manage that budget.
yeah. I think the thing that surprises me the most is I think most of the time we see that mix of practice. It's just preference, right? Like nobody's really been able to prove one way or the other, like this is better. and it's kind of theoretical. It's really hard to prove anything sort of perfect because you don't have an experiment, laboratory environment to sort of test and measure. But a lot of times it's, well, I think this will work. And I like to do it this way. A lot of the complexity that's been built into the software space for people doing cycle management is because like every merit process is like a thumbprint. It is unique to that leader, that company, that industry, whoever the head of engineering is, because they always have opinions, right? Like there's a certain set of ingredients that just make it different everywhere without a whole lot of like, well, this is the right answer. It's really just this should work and it feels right, or we have to trim it down. This is an easy way to do it. So it's just always interesting to see what causes that mix. I don't think there's anything that predicts like why it works that way. It's just more personality and preference in many circumstances.
And even within the same company, they may think they have something that works really well, but then they say, oh, let's tweak this a little bit this year and let's tweak that next year. I don't think I've ever been in a comp role where we've done it the same every single year.
Yeah. Yeah, or even within the same company, right? You think you have a method, but then you find out there's that leader who exports everything to Excel and sort of does their own methodology. And, it looks like they play by the rules, but they really built their own rules, right? Like that's pretty normal, unfortunately.
I think the other thing I've been surprised at is the small number, few or no people who go back and kind of see if their hypothesis was correct statistically. And so it's like, we're going to do this if we share the money different. Did that work or not? And usually you ask them if I went out and measured for success, to your point, Paul. You can't do it in an experimental way. But like, hey, we're going to give people 0 and they're all going to leave. They rarely go back out and say, oh, actually, none of them left. Now they're just worse performers because they're just going to ride this train until they get kicked off. Like that I've been surprised at more so. And I guess, I know, Paul, you have in some of the Novo stuff, like it's a serial process. And I do think, and I think, in some of the polls I've done, like one option of your goal for the merit process is I'm just glad to have this shit done. That's kind of the mentality they're in because it's kind of miserable and they're not measuring success. And I've been really surprised at that, I guess, because it is one of the few levers they have. Levers, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, that's right. I think we're all just happy to have it be done. And that deep breath or the trip to the Marriott on the beach on the weekend. Like it's just time to be through it and digging through the spreadsheet, right? Because it's always called like the spreadsheet V11, Nicole, 11 p.m., right? That's always the name of the file. Like going through that one more time is not anyone's idea of fun. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't, because how do you know if it worked if you didn't evaluate your outcomes? And what I always say is that doesn't have to be that scary. It's like 5 or 6 measures at the end of the day that you can really see. Like, did we differentiate? Of course, if you were on budget or not, because your CFO cares about that. But did you differentiate? Did you make a meaningful impact where you had people well below market? Look back a year later. Did those who had higher raises more likely or less likely to stick around? Like, it's a couple of easy touch points that should be automated. If all the vendors out there, hint Sean, are listening, like please build that in. Because that would make it easier for all of us.
I think The other one, though, Nicole, you didn't get to the one I thought for sure you were going to get to, and we can ask Paul this question because we had to field it. What do you do? Remember, we got this in Orlando, um, anonymously, of course, and then when I asked if they'd raise their hand, they wouldn't. What do you do with all the leftover money at the end of the merit process, Paul?
There's leftover money at the end of the merit process?
That was a legit question in the Orlando session that came through the app. Was like, how do you best suggest? Which I guess Nicole would say a beachfront, beachfront
For the
weekend.
comp team.
Yeah, for the
I think
comp.
I could count on one hand out of my 26 years in comp that I think I've seen there be money left over. Usually I have the opposite problem, which is sort of trimming back down to budget and a leader saying, whatever, we're done. Like they run out of steam too. And they're like, I'm not going to worry about that 0.1% over budget. I'm going to give the questioner the benefit of the doubt, which is this, because we talk a lot with bonuses, and I don't know how much you've got this issue in your current environment, Nicole, but the holdback problem, right? Hey, we're going to fund it 100%, but I'm going to give everybody 90 to start, and I'm going to save a bunch at the top to sort of distribute later. That's a really hard problem, actually, right? Because now everybody's made the recommendations, leaders have made smart decisions, and then there's another pot of money to hand out. So I'm going to give that questioner the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they're thinking of that, right? Like, how do you spend the reserve that's left over? Because that's logistically difficult. Because we see that a lot where that tends to get spent at the top, right? You end up with sort of outcome inequity because if I'm the head of a business unit and I set aside 10% of my merit budget, I'm more likely to give it to the people I know than find a home for it all the way down to my org chart. So maybe that's the problem they were citing was more process efficiency. What do you do if there's a big pot of money left? Not where should I spend it, hide it, and how many offshore bank accounts do I need to make sure nobody finds it? It's probably more along the lines of how do I best use that money? Maybe.
You're very optimistic, Paul.
I,
And Paul, I phrased it as, that's in the same vein of questions as, how do I greet the leprechaun when the unicorn brings down the pot of gold from the rain?
that's right.
Like I just like no, if that's my biggest problem at my job, I have extra money in the merit process. Like things are going really well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know, Nicole, just kind of from your perspective, probably a little more from the AACA, but where you're at, like, how are you seeing people either evaluate or, start to use technology? And I guess at some level, are they struggling to evaluate tech, get tech in? Like, how are you seeing tech play, in the comp space? Because if you go look at, because I am probably the world's biggest advocate of Paul's graphic, all the stuff that's out there, which they call it a better term, but all the stuff that is out there, I mean, are you seeing companies struggle picking, choosing, leveraging tech? Like, how are you seeing it from your perspective?
Okay, so I'll answer that from two perspectives. We are actually in the process of implementing a new HRIS system, and our old one was implemented in 1998, which for history buffs, that's when Google was invented.
That's a few years ago. So it's
Yes,
got some
yes.
miles on it.
Yes. So I know that's not comp specific, but I've been anxious to get that implemented so that I have better data and better capability to analyze that data. But surprisingly, there's been a lot of people that are really resistant just because it's change. So that's kind of the world I'm in right now. And I think thinking about the broader comp community, and I'll include myself in that too, just in terms of keeping up with what's out there. I think it's just, again, the pace of change has been so dramatic and there's so much it can be overwhelming. It's like, where do you start? How do you prioritize what you want out of it? What kind of data is going to be in it? How long are you going to be able to use this platform? And what if something changes? Is it agile enough to address those changes as well? So I think if I were in a position where I actually had that leftover money and I could spend it on a comp tool, I think I would be a little bit overwhelmed too. So I heard a statistic somewhere, and I don't remember where it was or what it was, but just the the sheer number of tools that are out there now is just dramatically increased over even the past year or two. So I think that's a big part of the problem, is just being overwhelmed and kind of how do you analyze all that and make a decision?
Yeah, totally. And let alone try to find money for it, right?
Right.
Just knowing what's possible is the first step, and then making a case for, especially if you're replacing Excel, right? Which is, it feels free. So how do you convince the CFO down the hall from you, who doesn't want to put artwork on the walls, to spend, 5 or 6 figures, depending on your size, to spend money in compensation? Like that's a tough conversation, obviously.
This has been great. I have one more question we ask everybody. So if you could automagically, which is a highly technical term, Nicole, I like to throw around, if you could automagically solve anything in HR, like any one problem, you could make it magically go away from everyone, what would it be?
So I have to say it would be performance management systems. I think it's one of those things that's been around since beginning of time essentially, but more recently maybe the 50s or so, and I don't know that we've improved it all that much over the years. And I think it ends up being very time consuming. The employees aren't thrilled with it. The managers aren't thrilled with it. HR is not thrilled with it. I've seen some little minor improvements here or there, but I don't think we've really solved that problem yet. Maybe I'll do that one day when I'm sitting in the Marriott on the beach, have time to think about it.
It's an interesting one, because I think at a high level has always been there's some subjectivity, and it's where do you push that down? And somebody somewhere always seems to assume that no one's reverse engineering the ramifications of the performance management. And as long as people's strategy is to hire smart people, those smart people you hired are going to be trying to figure out how to game the system, and that's the variable right now. And I think that's why it is remarkably difficult, and no one's really solved it. And then a little bit of my soapbox, doing performance once a year, I think that on top of your, like, how do we get it right, once a year is like, I'd like my feedback sooner than that. Like, I don't want Paul to stew for the next 350 days that I've been doing an awful job. I'd like that feedback sooner.
Yeah, I think the feedback's essential. It's still, and that can be ongoing. But like you said, when you get to the end of the year and you're summarizing all that, it can just be a challenge for it to be accurate, and it's old history by then. So what does that mean moving forward? I think if we can find a way to be more forward focused, that would definitely be more beneficial.
I think managers are smart. So you think about a typical merit matrix, and if Paul's a high performer, high in the range, and our merit matrix says he's not going to get any money, I just make him a 3 and I make someone else a 5, so that I can move money around in the merit matrix. They're smart. Like, people are, I think, pretty smart. They start to figure out the system of manipulating it. And so I think that's also part. There's just so many moving parts in performance. So I'm with you, Nicole. If they could figure that out, because the merit matrix looks great on paper, and then it's so reliant, if you pay for performance, on that ranking.
Yeah.
This has been great. This is great. I know we'll be doing some lemoncello, or we'll keep giving it different names as we go. Mostly so I don't have to wear this shirt again. But I'm so excited we got you on here to chat. Because you've got such a unique perspective, both as, from where you work and getting to see all the companies in Atlanta.
Right. Yeah, it was fun. I appreciate the invite. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks for your time, Nicole.
Thank you.